¿Qué tal? Muy buenos días. Mi nombre es José Manuel Martínez, consultor de servicios de TI aquí en Lowbury International y les doy la más cordial bienvenida a este webinar titulado Cierre, brechas de seguridad causadas por FTP y ODBC en su IBMI. La agenda para el día de hoy acerca de nosotros, de Lowbury International, igualmente vamos a abordar el tema Cierre las brechas de seguridad causadas por FTP y ODBC en su IBMI. Bueno, nosotros somos una empresa de consultoría en TI con más de 20 años de experiencia en Latinoamérica y Europa. Implementamos soluciones que apoyan las mejores prácticas como lo son ITIL, ISO 27002 y COVID. Nuestro modelo de negocio, bueno, siguiendo las mejores prácticas, creamos metodologías propias basadas en la experiencia y usando la tecnología y les ofrecemos a ustedes esos servicios de consultoría, soluciones de software, actualización tecnológica y los ayudamos, ¿verdad?, a alcanzar pues esos objetivos de negocio. Para llevar a cabo los proyectos utilizamos la siguiente metodología, la cual tiene 4 fases. La primera de ellas es el análisis, donde nosotros vamos a recopilar toda esa información sobre su infraestructura, es decir, toda esa parte modular de sus sistemas, e igualmente el entorno del negocio, es decir, cómo trabajan ustedes actualmente. El modelo tecnológico, bueno, con toda esa información del análisis, elaboramos un modelo tecnológico donde vamos a tomar en cuenta sus procesos de negocio, la tecnología que utilizan, y usando las mejores prácticas, las vamos a alinear a su estrategia corporativa y igualmente a los objetivos del negocio. En la parte de implementación, en esta fase la realizamos a 3 niveles para que esa solución adquirida no se quede solamente en la parte operativa, es decir, que la parte ejecutiva, por ejemplo, el jefe directo, directores, estén enterados de lo que ocurre ya sea por medio de reportes o gráficas. Y finalmente, la validación, es decir, ese análisis que realizamos, pues sea el resultado de lo que se está obteniendo al día a día para verificar que efectivamente pues se les está apoyando con esos objetivos de su negocio. Bueno, nuestras líneas de negocio son las siguientes. La primera de ellas es la seguridad de la información. Aquí las aplicaciones con las que contamos le van a permitir tener un registro claro y preciso sobre quién accede a su información, pues quién realiza cambios, cómo están los perfiles en el sistema, van a poder monitorear las políticas de seguridad y van a poder igualmente definir quiénes pueden realizar ciertos cambios o quién puede ejecutar comandos en sus servidores. Y por la parte de GoAnywhere es un software que nos va a ayudar a tener esas transferencias de información seguras y encriptadas. En la parte de monitoreo de infraestructura y servicios de TI, nos vamos a apoyar a conocer la disponibilidad de todos sus dispositivos. Vamos a poder obtener dashboard, vamos a poder ver las pantallas donde le van a informar lo que sucede en cada dispositivo, va a permitirle tener alarmas sobre algún comportamiento anormal y además va a poder realizar un seguimiento puntual a los procesos que son críticos para el negocio, va a poder saber pues cómo van en tiempo real sus ventas, el estatus de sus inventarios, igualmente otra información. Y por la parte de monitoreo de redes, nuestra tecnología pues va a permitirle conocer cuál de sus equipos está consumiendo más ancho de banda en el enlace, va a poder tener esa visión de disponibilidad y desempeño de sus equipos. La parte de control de cambios, bueno, la tecnología nos va a permitir dar el seguimiento al ciclo de desarrollo del software, al poder mejorar los controles de versiones y cambios realizados, así como esa distribución en diferentes sistemas y plataformas, y vamos a poder reducir el tiempo empleado en la liberación, ya sea de un cambio o igualmente de un nuevo módulo. La parte de performance y capacity planning, vamos a poder conocer el desempeño de los servidores, vamos a poder ver los servicios instalados en el negocio, vamos a poder ayudarles a realizar esa proyección que les va a permitir saber en cuánto tiempo pues será necesario aumentar los recursos en su servidor e incluso también cuándo deben cambiarlo. Y finalmente, dentro de las líneas de negocio, la parte de automatización de tareas y procesos de TI. Aquí nosotros pues vamos a administrar y automatizar pues esas tareas y procesos. Lo importante de todo esto es que es en múltiples plataformas. Nos vamos a poder apoyar de dashboard que nos van a informar todo lo que va aconteciendo. Igualmente vamos a poder tener esos flujos de trabajo. Bueno, a lo largo de estos 20 años de experiencia hemos trabajado con las mejores empresas, aquí algunas de ellas. Igualmente, pues a lo largo de este tiempo hemos formado sólidas alianzas con empresas líderes en la industria que nos van a respaldar, ¿verdad? Con ese software de vanguardia. Y vamos a poder brindarles a ustedes pues las mejores soluciones y servicios especializados. Y en esta ocasión, pues toca el turno a Health Systems, que bueno, ya tiene más de 30 años en el mercado de TI, más de 10,000 clientes alrededor del mundo, atiende a 350 de las 2,000 mejores empresas según Forbes. Y en esta ocasión tenemos como invitado especial a Robin Tatum, que es director de seguridad tecnológica. Robin, please proceed with your presentation.
All right, well, hello everybody. Welcome to today's session. We're going to be talking about a security alert we want you to be aware of regarding PC connections coming into IBM. We've got obviously the mention here of FTP and ODBC, but they're not the only avenues that people can use, and we want to make sure that if you're using those types of tools that it's going in a secure manner and everything is being handled for you. My name is Robin Tatum. I'm the Director of Security Technologies here at Health Systems, which means it is my distinct pleasure and honor to be able to talk to you about some of these topics. My tenure here at Health Systems is over 9 years now. I just celebrated that, so that's a fun thing. And really my role is to help spread the message about IBMI security and where some of the risks and vulnerabilities are and ways that we can mitigate those risks, both in the operating system as well as, of course, through the portfolio of tools that we have here at Health Systems. It's also my distinct honor, as always, to introduce you to my cohort here, my partner in crime, Paul Culin. Paul, why don't you say hi to the good folks?
It's good to be with everyone. As you can see by the picture, I'm what Grandma called a good eater.
I would say it's what doctors say I have what's called a bit of a weight problem, right? So, not the saying you are, Paul, but you're a handsome fella. Now, when it comes to health systems, we are living and breathing the security message, and that comes really in two flavors. One is through a product portfolio that we have. If you've heard the name PowerTech before, that is our security portfolio, and that's kind of my aspect of the business here at Health Systems. But we also have a corresponding section of service offerings that is led by Kira Woodbury. Now, I've got industry veteran here, which probably isn't perhaps the most politically correct way of saying that, but Kira has probably more experience in IBMI security than anybody on the planet. She was the IBM security architect for over a dozen years and certainly brings with her a team that is highly experienced. So it's not just about software solutions, it's certainly about risk remediation, pen testing, assessment work, and everything that comes along with that from Carol's team as well, which we're very pleased to have as part of our synergistic relationship there. Health Systems is also a member of the PCI Security Standards Council, so if you're one of the folks dealing with credit cards and you know how much fun that can be, then we are part of that council and certainly can be of benefit there to you as well. And one thing I'm very proud of is that we are the vendor that is authorized by the National Association of State Boards of Accountancy, try saying that 3 times fast, to issue continuing professional education credits for security education on IBMI. So basically that means we are the ones that are certified to educate the auditors, which is something that we're very proud of. Another aspect of my role here is to publish the annual State of IBMI Security Study. That's a report we've been issuing to the IBMI community now since 2004. And it's really the only study out there of its kind. And if you've not heard of that or if you've not read that study before, certainly we invite you to take advantage of that free white paper download. And we also have some recorded webinars that you can access as well, talking about the latest and greatest state of security study. In fact, I'm going to point out only a few slides from that here today when we talk about PCs connecting in. The first key point that I want to make is that the operating system, IBMI or OS400, depending on how gray your hair is, has an integrated database built into it. It's been called DB2 for quite a while. They've just renamed it slightly. They gave it a small b instead of a big B, but it is in essence a fully functional integrated database. Now, when you give a user access to the system, when you create that all-important user ID and password, you as the user are automatically getting access not only to the system, but also to that database. Not only for the green screen, perhaps, that your application is based upon, but actually through every interface. Well, mean by this is that the operating system does not differentiate between access through, say, FTP or ODBC from the green screen. You open the door to one interface, you've opened the door to all interfaces. You close the door to one interface, you've closed it to all. And that means that as an operating system, while the security is fully integrated in with the database, it's not very flexible. And so we have to consider the way that users are legitimately accessing the data in the environment and ways that that potentially could be abused. Now here's an example of a slide that did come from the State of Security Study for 2018, which is the amount of authority that the entity known as public or star public has to the application libraries. If you're not familiar with the term public, or if you've heard it but not entirely comfortable on what it is, it really infers that the user has credentials on the system, as I mentioned, but they haven't been given any explicit permission. There's nothing intrinsic about them. So, Robin, you can do this, or Robin, you can't do that. Public is just a generic reference to everybody on the system that doesn't have any explicit authority. Now, in most environments, on most operating systems, the desire and the default would be that you would be excluded from things. If you are not given authority to access something, then the default is you can't. However, in the IBMI community, we have to deal with the fact that the system default is not to exclude people from the database, it's actually to include them. In fact, the supplied default from IBM is start change, and that's why we see almost a half of the libraries on the systems that we scan throughout the year sitting at this public change setting. Now, we also have public all and public use. These are other flavors of that, but they all let the user into the library. The most important number on this slide is the exclude. It's only 10%, meaning that 90% of the libraries on the system are open-doored, and the users that are on your system are likely able to step inside and potentially access the data files inside the library. Bottom line, what we're seeing is the database is extremely permissive. If the user has credentials on the system, there's a very good chance that IBMI itself thinks that it's okay for users to do basically whatever they want. Now, above and beyond the private and public authorities, we also have what's called a special authorities, or special authority, and there are 8 of these that can be assigned to a user. We're talking things like security administrator rights, job control, spool control. But the most important one of all is star all object. As the name suggests, this is a global permission to access all objects on the server. They are objects you created, objects that are part of a commercial application. They are objects that are part of the operating system itself. I can do absolutely anything I want to any of those objects, even if you have explicitly said that I shouldn't. And that's because all object is evaluated before all of the other authority checks. When we look in the State of Security Study for 2018, we found that on average, 153 profiles on each system have this all object privilege. In the AIX world or Unix world, we tend to call that root privileges. And so if you're familiar with that term, that's what we're dealing with here. But it is incredibly pervasive. We see so many users with this level of authority, and we have to recognize, of course, that then the user has immediate authority to everything on the system. The big question is, can they do anything with this? If you're familiar with the green screen environment, you're probably thinking to yourself, but Robin, it's okay, I have a menuing system. When the user signs on, they're dropped into the application, they see the 3 options they're allowed to take, they don't get command line privileges, so I'm pretty comfortable that I have constrained the user functionality. The problem is that when we make PC-based connections, we're actually going directly to the database. So here we see the all-traditional green screen menu, and it's very easy to manage the user functionality through this type of interface. But if we make an ODBC connection or an FTP connection or a DDM connection, all of these interfaces don't present menus. You don't see that green screen function. And the user is therefore fully able to exploit the amount of public, private, and all object permission that they have been given. Unfortunately, and I don't know if you hear this too, Polly, but I sometimes still hear in this day and age that the users don't know how to use these types of functions. But the reality is that it is not difficult to use. In fact, it's intentionally easy to use. We want the users to be able to take advantage of this, but not over advantage, right? So these tools are very beneficial from a business perspective. They give us insight into our data. They allow us to do mining and analysis that is going to enable us to make good business decisions. But if a user can simply extract data down to their PC and display it or copy it, we in essence have significant potential of a data breach. Likewise, if that user is able to manipulate the data locally on their PC and then fire the results back to the host, we have significant potential of corruption of the database at the server level because the application is no longer overseeing those changes. So somebody could put a decimal point in the wrong place, or they could put characters into a numeric field, and the operating system won't know where that change came from. It'll simply obey the request, and you have a corrupt database on your hands. So when used carefully and when used legitimately, this can be a very beneficial environment. But for when it's abused, all of a sudden we have potentially sensitive data being spread around. Here I've got a spreadsheet from a human resource file. I think this is one of your payroll files. I recognize your stamp on the names there, Polly. But in essence, that salary field is probably something that you want limited to only users that are part of human resources or part of the payroll department. Not something that you want being posted on Reddit or some other site or being sent through an email that is not in an encrypted form. And that is definitely the potential risk that we face. I've mentioned that we can download data. I've also said that we can upload data. And the most important aspect of this that you need to be aware is that the operating system simply doesn't log that type of activity, which is an audit violation right out of the gate. And even if you're not dealing with any type of formal regulatory compliance, it's just bad practice, right? If there's no log of a data extraction, how are you ever going to determine that there was a data breach or the scope of that data breach? Here we've got Excel making it really easy for us to transfer data to or from the system. If you don't have Excel or you don't load the ODBC driver, what else can we do? Well, here's an example of a simple DOS prompt where we have made an FTP connection into the system. We've leveraged the credentials that we were given for the approved application to make a server direct connection using FTP. And per the red boxes there, you can see that we have put a Word document into a file called customer, presumably a customer master file, in a production library. And the operating system doesn't say, hang on a second, this data doesn't look right. It simply transfers it bit for bit, byte for byte, and does so extremely quickly. In fact, this file was corrupted in 0.00 seconds, so it doesn't get much faster than that. And now we have a database that is corrupted without the fact that there's any traceable cause of that, and the operating system just has to deal with it. Now, in many instances, this is purely accidental. I had a customer who had somebody in their accounts department downloading their general ledger file to an Excel spreadsheet because that was the tool he was familiar with and comfortable with. Unfortunately, perhaps a little too comfortable because he had applied a filter to the data, limited the rows that he was working with, and when he did his transfer back, he forgot to remove the filter first. And so what ended up happening was that he replaced the file on the system. All of a sudden, the significant portion of the data disappeared, and it took them quite a while to actually figure out what had happened. It wasn't malicious. The guy was horrified that that's what had occurred, but didn't make it any less disruptive and painful to have to recover from that. So just be aware that this is definitely a capability that is accessible to people, it's easy to use, and it is allowing things to go horribly wrong. When we talk about IBMI, we talk about the fact the server is securable. Many people think it's secure, but there's a difference between those two words. Securable implies that there's some work that needs to be done, and that's something I completely agree with. In fact, I would offer that we have kind of a 1-2 punch that we deal with in the IBMI community, and that's, first of all, that I have seen in my tenure in the community that users typically have excessive capabilities on the server and a lot of data rights to the application data, far beyond what would be demonstrated as an actual requirement. We also see that the operating system now has powerful TCP services built in, has since about the mid-90s, and many of these are active by default. So if you have not changed them to not auto start, just assume they're up and listening. And again, the fact that we use a single credential infrastructure means that the existing user ID and password that the user was given can be leveraged across all of these different services. Some services can be shut down and probably should be if you're not using them. Some services cannot be shut down, so we can't rely on that as the only control mechanism. It's important that we have other ways to be able to do that. It's not just about data transfer either. If you are thinking to yourself, but all I have to do is limit the ability for a user to run commands and I mitigate it, then what you need to be aware of is that some of these TCP services don't actually observe that setting. So the limit capabilities parameter on a user profile is a very important and beneficial security control that is 100% effective in the green screen world and only partially effective in the non-green screen world. So still take advantage of it, absolutely encourage it. It's a low-hanging, easy-to-deploy control, but we have to recognize that there are limitations on how beneficial it can be outside of the green screen, and we have to have compensating controls to ensure that we are able to manage which users are allowed to run commands on the server. What we end up with is a pretty simple equation. We have powerful users, we have open and listening services, and what we end up with is a high-risk scenario. Now, I call this a new function, but let's face it, it's been more than 20 years at this point, so even for us in the IBM community that tend to not adopt things right away, this has been out here a while. But when IBM introduced the TCP services into the operating system, they also aggregated a suite of exit points in as well. Now, an exit point, if you're not familiar with that term, is simply a hook in an existing process that allows for the registration of a custom program. It means that we can extend the functionality beyond what the original operating system function was. And there's a ton of these exit points scattered throughout the operating system. You may even have some in your applications. In the operating system, there's really two categories. One is a post-process exit point, one is a pre-process exit point. The difference between them is when the exit program, which is the custom function, is invoked. In the case of a post-process exit point, what we end up with is an exit program being called after the requested function has already been performed. An example of that might be the creation of a user profile, for example, after which the exit program can be invoked in order to maybe create a work library for the user or enroll them into an application. The user profile's already been created at that point. There's nothing you can do to undo it, per se. In contrast to that, we also have pre-process exit points, where the operating system receives a request from the user, but before it honors that request, it invokes the exit program. And that exit program now has a special responsibility. It has the ability to return a pass-fail indicator back to the exit point, telling the exit point whether it is okay with the requested function or whether it should be denied. The beauty of this is that we can leverage exit program technology for network access control, meaning that we can now oversee that FTP connection or that ODBC connection. And even though the IBM security controls are permissive and would potentially allow the user to do what they're asking, we can apply some business logic to that to say, in this instance, I don't want that all-object user downloading the payroll master file, or I don't want that privately authorized user from leveraging FTP to manipulate the database, and I can control all that. Now, the exit program itself is actually a custom-written application, so you're not going to get that from IBM. You want that exit program to do two things. One is that you want to create the audit trail of the function. The operating system, as I said before, does not see that function in a capacity that it can record it. So if data is leaving your system, it's happening transparently. We also, because of it being a pre-process exit point, want the exit program to make a determination whether the user should be allowed to perform that function, meaning that we have to put some access control into that exit program. If we don't have object level security, it can augment that. If we do have object level security, then it can allow flexibility in being able to set different access levels for different interfaces. So now I can have full access in the green screen, read access into ODBC, and no ability to FTP the file. This exit program, as I said, can return a pass-fail indicator that will then halt the process independently of the IBMI security authorization, or it can progress on and the operating system gets to have the final say in whether the user can perform the task or not. So we're not bypassing security through an exit program, we're pre-processing, if you will. I mentioned that IBM doesn't supply these programs. You have two choices. One, you can write your own. And if all you want to do is block everything other than green screen, I would say that's the approach that I would follow. If, however, like most people, you need to use these functions for business purposes, or you want the flexibility of being able to use them when you need, then I would suggest that you leverage a commercial application in order to do that so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. One thing we do within the IBMI security study, the state of IBMI security, is to look and see if you guys are using these exit programs already. And so when we take a look at that, we see that we have a significant prevalence of people that are not using your potential exit point hooks. So even though it has been 25 or more years, or 23 years since this functionality was brought into the operating system, almost 3/4 of you don't have any exit program coverage. Now, I've got it listed here as rudimentary exit program coverage, and the reason for that is that there are about 30 different interfaces in that support exit programs, and we only requested that one of them be covered with an exit program just to show that there is some concept awareness here. When we look at it in terms of full coverage, which is usually indicative of a commercial application, then we see that the number of systems that are exposed jumps all the way to 94%. As I said, that's indicative of a commercial solution. There's a number of them out on the market. We're going to talk about one here in just a second, so if you are interested, hang on and we'll show you that. If you were not sure, and there were 22% of you that answered that way, then we are able to run a security scan over your system. This is a very quick and pain-free function. We do this hundreds of times a year for the IBMI community, and it will give you great feedback about 7 different categories of IBMI security, one of which is whether you have those exit programs currently deployed. So if you'd like to validate that you do, or if you're not sure and you'd like to know, or if you'd simply just like to run a security check across your whole IBMI environment, take advantage of this. There's no cost, no obligation, and we certainly encourage people to do that. So the big question is, do we really need exit programs? And there's 2 scenarios here that I want to talk about. One is have a lack of operating system security or object level security. In this instance, and this is arguably the most common scenario that we see, we can leverage exit programs to prevent unauthorized or unwanted access to the system. You have to bear in mind that if somebody is going to hack you from outside or even on the network, they're probably not going to use the green screen. They're not going to download and fire up an emulation session and try and hack you. What they're going to use is industry standard interfaces to do that. So these are the risk points that you are facing for a data breach. So it's important that even if the profile is legitimate, we can validate that the user who's making that connection is actually, first of all, the intended user. We can do some multi-factor authentication to validate that, but also that they're staying within the boundaries, that they're staying on the path and not wandering off into interfaces and functions and databases that they shouldn't be in. The trick here is that we want to continue to allow beneficial and approved access. These tools are beneficial to the business, and we're not suggesting that you should never use them. We just want to make sure that they're being used appropriately. And as I said before, the operating system is simply not giving us great feedback about who is using them, what they're using them for, and we want to make sure that all of that is being logged. All right? If you're thinking to yourself, you have good object level security, I would caution you to the idea that when most people say that and we dig a little bit deeper, oftentimes we find that the database is far more exposed than the expectation. So I am absolutely encouraging you making sure that object level security is deployed. To me, it's the foundation of the house, and it makes sure that everything else is strong and robust. But don't be lulled into a false sense of security. Most commercial applications leave it to you to make sure that the database objects are secured. And most of us think it is the responsibility of the application provider, so we often get this disconnect. We also have to bear in mind, as I've said before, that the authority for applications is applicable to all interfaces. If you have the door open in one, it's open in all. The operating system simply is unable to differentiate between those different access methods. So even though you have good object level security, the flexibility simply isn't there. And the exit programs can give you that flexibility to set different authority levels based on the different interfaces being used. We're also able to record the action. Using an exit program, it's possible then to build the audit trail that is lacking in the operating system. Now, if that's not enough reason to leverage exit programs, even with object level security, what we have to recognize is the command line permissions can still be circumvented through some of these interfaces. So it is absolutely critical, even beyond the database, that we make sure that the exit programs are saying, if you're not supposed to have command line in a green screen, you probably shouldn't also have it through remote command or FTP. Ultimately, what we're dealing with on the IBMI platform is that we have this perfect storm of vulnerability. Awareness in security amongst most of us in the IBMI profession is typically pretty low. It's growing, and you guys are doing a great job of attending sessions like this and coming to seminars and sessions like Common, and you're learning a lot about it. But as an intrinsic and trained discipline, security is not something typically that we deal with. Unfortunately, growth in that area often comes from the audit community where they're holding our feet to the fire, but IBMI awareness amongst the audit profession is typically low as well, meaning that there's really nobody giving us good direction. We all know that a lot of valuable data is stored on these power servers. That's why we're here. That's why we love the platform. It's a stable, scalable, incredible technology. But when that data is stored there, we have to recognize that most of it is not secured. And the profiles that we have are often far too powerful. Not because we think people should be able to access everything, but most of us have either inherited the environment or the profiles that we're leveraging as our templates for duplication today often were born many, many years ago, generations ago, in some instances predating as far as a popular medium, meaning that we had Twinx and dumb terminals, and it didn't really matter if the profiles were privileged because the menu was all encompassing. And we still leverage those same profile settings even today. Now, I don't know if I've freaked you all out yet. Polly, I think this is perhaps a good opportunity to introduce one of the best ways that I've come across in order to limit and regulate what these users are doing. We're going to talk about a tool, one of the first tools we had in our portfolio. Not that it looks the same way it did when we first invented it. It's come through many evolutions since, but it's a tool that we've had for a long time. It is an incredibly powerful tool designed specifically for this very problem where we're going to be balancing the access of these users. So why don't, if you will, take us through a quick walkthrough of this technology, show us how we can see and control these users and manage what they're doing for us.
Yep, sounds good. Always a pleasure to do so. And let's start off here by looking at various ways that users can circumvent the green screen or applications that you may have given them access to. I'm initially going to start off here, gang, on the environmentally friendly green screen. And the reason why I'm doing that is I want you to see the amount of authority that I will be using here throughout this part of the presentation. I'm on a little sandbox here called System URL, and my user profile is Paul C. And Paul C is, let's go ahead and display that for you. Paul C is a copy of QSEC Officer, is a copy of Security Officer. I have all 8 special authorities, and there's all object right at the top. And the reason I want to point this out is that you'll see how powerful the solution is. If we tell network security to block access through various avenues into the I-series, it's going to do it without regard for the user's authority. So we can block all object users from performing access to data through some of these various back doors, if you will. Okay. Now, here's an example. And I'm going to, again, do this from the green screen. Obviously, every person that's on the call here today has sensitive data that's residing out on their I-series, data that you want to defend, data that you may be granting access to through menu options or through approved applications, and that's great. That's how we want our users to access data, through methods that we give them. We don't want them to color outside of the lines and circumvent the access that we give them. Now, here on the green screen, I'm going to go after a very sensitive file on this machine. And I'm going to use a little simulated payroll master file here. It could be anything. This could be accounts payable, accounts receivable, general ledger, you name it. But we all have things that are important to us. Now, as an all-object user, I can get in here to file payroll and library payroll, and of course, I can do what I want with the data in here. I can update it. It just gave Carrie a $10,000 raise, and I'm sure she's happy about that. Okay. Now, what I don't want are my users accessing data through mechanisms that are not approved. And one of those could be through the use of file transfer. Now, your users, your end users, could be as lost as a goose in a snowstorm when it comes to the I-series and when it comes to grabbing data off of the I-series. But we typically hand people the ability to do these things through interfaces like here. I'm in a 5250 session. Bryce, this is for you. One of our attendees, Bryce, I think he's out in Oshkosh, asked about ACS access and if we can control what people can do through here. So I'm using ACS in this respect, and right up on the toolbar, and you'll see this in your old versions of client access as well, is the data transfer option. It's staring the user right in the face. Right? You can transfer data from the I-series, you can transfer data to the I-series. So in this case, let's go back out here. I'm still on System URL. Let's go to that same payroll file in library payroll. Now, do you want your users grabbing data through a mechanism like this? And in this case, we'll say, let's do it for output device display, put it up on the screen. Now, I've told network security, thou shalt not touch sensitive files like this outside of the green screen or outside of an approved application. So when I attempt to transfer that data down, and here the I-series is saying, who are you? I'm Paul C., all object user. Here you can see that that function is being rejected by the network security exit program. I can't have that object. Now, we could use network security to shut down data transfer entirely, and that's more than likely going to be appropriate for, as Robin mentioned earlier, the public. However, more than likely you're going to have exceptions to that rule. You're probably going to have folks who do have a legitimate need for data transfer. So what you'll be able to do through network security is run reporting to see who has a demonstrable need for data transfer. And if they have it, you can allow those users to come in, and it could be a group member as well, they can continue to use data transfer, but it's going to be shut down for the public. And moreover, out of the people that you do allow to use data transfer, if you want, you can even put object restrictions in place. You can define the objects that you'll allow them to touch or not allow them to touch. Now, in this case, I told network security, thou shalt not touch file payroll in library payroll, lest there be gnashing of the teeth here. There are other objects in that library that users may have a demonstrable need to grab. There's another object in that same library called file pay new, and I have chosen not to defend that object because there are folks who need to get it. So here when we say let's start that transfer, you'll see that it comes right down for me here. Network security has not been told to block object access to this. Now, gang, I'm using that term, object access, not object authority. Okay, we're not playing with object authority here. The user's native OS 400 i5 OS authority remains the same. Okay, what we're doing is controlling how the end user can access the object. Can they access an object that they have rights to using data transfer in ACS or in the old client access or through something else? Could be through Surveyor or one of our own products and so forth. Okay, so I hope that that's pretty clear here. Ostensibly, what we want to do is we want to dumb down the user's PC to the status of a dumb terminal. If you don't give them a menu option, if you don't give them a command line, they're not going to touch the object. If you don't give them an application to go through, they're not going to touch the sensitive object. If you give them a menu option or an application, God bless them. Right? You can set up your security that way and let them have at it. Let's see here. Bryce, this is still for you because you, again, asked about ACS. Let's, through ACS here, use the, how about we go into the IFS? Again, you can see how easy this is for the end user. Let's go into the integrated file system here. What a great place to play around. User policy, you know I'm an all object user. Okay, so I'm signing back on here to system URL. We're coming out to the integrated file system, showing lots of neat things here to play with. Let's go home. And here I have folders, some of which have security on them through network security. Here's a folder called Sandy. We're not securing that. And I am an all object user, so as you can imagine, I can play around in here. See, I'm going to have to do a little bit of housekeeping and see if I can, sorry about this, I have to be able to maneuver around the presenter controls here. All right, now here's my little payroll folder, and I've told network security, again, thou shalt not touch payroll outside of the green screen. And here's a payroll folder. So here when we attempt to go in, browse around, you can see here that there's been an IO error, and that is network security blocking access there, saying you cannot get there. We can also tell network security to defend, let me minimize this, live TV. You could tell network security to defend objects, files, for example, things that may be residing in these folders. Here's an Excel spreadsheet, for example, that we may want to try to delete. It's asking for my password here. There you go. So I'm trying to delete that file, but look what's happening here. It was not deleted. This is my own folder, by the way. I've told network security, thou shalt not delete that file. Okay, so you could get very granular with this if you want to. Now, I don't want the takeaway for today for you to think that you have to put a ton of granularity around your rules, because you most certainly do not. What I do want you to take away is the knowledge that it's better to have that ability and not need it than to need it and not have it. So if you want to control by individual objects, you can certainly do that. You can control by IP address. We even have port restrictions. But let's go continue on here. Let's go to Excel. And again, grabbing data off the iSeries through a mechanism like this is super simple for the end users. This is all right in front of their face all day long. Here we're going to click on data, or for those of you in upstate New York, data. We're going to get data from other sources, a source other than my PC. And here we'll use Microsoft Query. And you'll notice in a little applet there, it says ODBC. Gang, that acronym ODBC means Open Database Connectivity. And that is the complete antithesis of what we want for good security. The last thing I want is open connectivity to my database, right? I'm sure you feel the same way. So we want to be able to control what people can do there. Now here I have a data source defined already, which is system URL. If you don't, you just say new data source and put in the system IP address, and you're off to the races. Here I'm going to system URL and saying, who art thou? And I art Paul C, all object user and deity on the system. Let's connect up. Now it's going to default to my payroll library. The reason I have it doing that is my default table here is because I perform this presentation pretty frequently. It saves a lot of keystrokes. Now there's 3 objects living inside of this payroll library. There's file pay new, right? You saw me pull that file down through data transfer. Here and it's not being restricted. Here if I want to import those fields into my query, no problem. You can see the fields go right in. But file payroll here is being defended. So when I try to pull those fields into my query, network security has something to say about it. It blocks it. Okay. I hope this is making sense for everybody. So let's kill this and let's drop this down. Let's go to how about an FTP connection here, gang? Robin mentioned FTP. So we'll grab a command prompt. Easy enough for your users to do. If FTP is up on your system, you simply go to a command prompt, type in FTP in the system name or IP address of the box. Here it's going up to Earl at Help Systems. I'm signing on again here as Paul C, all object user, security officer, right? I put in my password that I'm not sharing with you. And I am now logged on. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the user may be as lost as a goose in a snowstorm here. But they can always do this. They can always ask for help. And I'm a user with an ID and password, so the iSeries wants to help. Okay? So it's telling me, here's a list of commands that are available for you to use in your FTP connection here. You can delete things, you can get them, you can put things up there. Here's remote help. Gives even more help. Tells the users here, look, if you don't know the syntax, here you go. If you want to play around with database files, here's the format. qsys.lib library name, there you go. If you're playing in the IFS, be sure to include root. Look at that, it literally holds their hand. But what they can do here now is go after objects that they have rights to. Maybe they are a member of an application group, right? And they're given an inordinate amount of authority or a lot of authority to objects that they would normally touch through the application. Do you want them grabbing things like this? Here we'll say, let's get in library payroll that pay new file. Pay new is not being defended. You can see it comes down right away. Transfer successfully. But now let's go after that payroll file that is being defended. So file payroll and library payroll, you can see immediately we're rejected here. Network security is blocking that. Okay, there are other methods of getting in. I'll tell you what, let's do one here right quick. Let's use iNav. Okay, I'm sure that you have folks out there that done with Operations Navigator. And let's go into databases here. There's my database. We'll go to schemas. Robin, give me a heads up when time is running short. Here's payroll. Let's look at the tables in there. You know there's 3 of them. Right? There's pay new, there's payroll. Now, take note here of who the object owner is of that payroll file that I have not been able to touch outside of the green screen. Yours truly, it's mine. I own that object. I created it. I can have it. Network security has been told don't let him touch it unless he's going through some approved means. So here if I ask iNav to open that up and let me go in and edit the contents, you can see here the exit program is rejecting that. It's setting a return code, as Robin mentioned, right? 0 or 1, approve or deny. That's blocking it. Okay? I hope this makes sense to everybody. Now, there's two interfaces, gang, to working with this solution. We have a green screen interface, and we also have a WUI interface. It's fun to say and fun to use, a web user interface. I'm going to start off with the green screen here right quick. And I'm going to quickly get a report out in the oven, because one of the most salient features of network security is its incredible capability to audit all of this autonomous traffic that's occurring out there. And we want to be able to run really nice reports so that we can see how our users are coming in, and we can see the objects that they're touching. And if they have a demonstrable need for that to continue, we can use those audited entries to create rules. Okay? Real easy to deploy. Okay? But we always want to start off in an auditing, a passive mode, so we can see what's going on. Now here I'm going to run a report by user. Okay? We can tell the tool, show me what's going on the FTP server, or show me what's going on with the servers that accommodate ODBC traffic. What's really neat here is that I can target individual users. Okay? So here I could say, let's take a look at me. You could put this to an out file, query over it if you want. You could put this in the IFS. We could also report on this through the compliance monitor solution. And for those of you that license that, there's some great reporting there if you have network security deployed. And for those of you that have our Interact solution, you could also see these transactions through Interact if you have both licensed here. So let's look at the spool file, gang. There we go. Again, we're just looking for my activity, user Paul C. And we're seeing here sign on. It's even giving my desktop information. This is just simply client access, request and release of license information. And here you can see Paul C was rejected from retrieving file information payroll. I was trying to retrieve file transfer on file payroll and library payroll. See there? There you go. Here I was allowed to grab file pay new. Right? Then I went into the IFS, and you can see my traffic here. Right? There's home. Here I went into Sandy. Here I was rejected from listing the stream file, looking around in the payroll folder. Right? What did I do next? Here we go. I'm just browsing around in there at that point. Let's go down. Here we are. Here you can see MS Query. Okay, it's telling you right here, this user's playing around at this point, or using I shouldn't say playing around, this could be legit. Microsoft Query, users in Excel. And what's that user doing? Well, just keep looking around in here. There you can see what's going on under the covers. Here we go. Paul C was allowed to retrieve the field information out of file pay new. I pulled the fields for file pay new into my spreadsheet. But I was rejected when I tried to retrieve the field information for the payroll master file here. Then I went to the FTP server. I signed on from this IP address. I was allowed to have the FTP server send file pay new. IBM's nomenclature doesn't use get and put, it uses send and receive. So this is a get, or a git, as we say here in Houston. Next up, you can see rejection here for the FTP server sending Paul C file payroll in library payroll. Okay. I hope this is making sense to everyone as we look through, and some other traffic coming up here as well. There we are. And at the bottom, you can see all the various servers that were touched during that time period, whether they were approved, rejected. You'll see the server functions and so on. Now let's segue over to the WUI. It's fun to say. WUI access is through a web browser. And forgive me for changing the size of the browser. This part of my screen here has all kinds of presenter controls that block my view here. So I have to move things around a little bit. I have a link to our Insight front end, which is common front end for health systems products, and we have this in the works. We have some solutions already in there, but it's going to give you a central point of control for many health systems products. And in this case, we want to work with PowerTech Network Security. And we can work with multiple systems here. You can create your rules on one system, LPAR, and propagate them out to others. Import, export, it's really neat. Let's start off with the home view. I really like the home view. Here we go. Now the home view tells me the servers that my users are hitting. Some folks might, and I've been hearing this for 20 plus years that I've been working with the exit programs with customers. Paulie, I don't know if I have FTP traffic occurring out there or not. I don't know who's using ODBC connections. Well, here you can see it. It tells you, and here we're saying, just show me today. My FTP server has been touched. There's been 2 permitted transactions and 1 that was rejected. There's been 1 sign-on to the FTP sign-on server. Down here, we see one of the servers used for ODBC activity, the SQL server. There's been 10 rejected transactions, 362 that were permitted. And of course, we could drill down with this with the reporting and see that activity there. We could see that there's been 58 initializations of the database server. So you're going to know, gang, if folks are coming in through these back doors, the reporting's going to show you what folks have been doing. And you can view that again through the environmentally friendly green screen, as well as through the WUI front end. We have some folks that just are more comfortable with a graphical front end, and God bless you if you're one of them. So we can grab them through here. Gorgeous reporting. Just gorgeous. I could see everything here. Policy rejected from retrieving file, payroll, and library payroll. Super clean, easy to look at. You can define your object rules from in here. We could see transactions that have been captured by the product, and we can create rules predicated upon this captured transactions. And you can see how many times somebody's performed a particular transaction. So in this case here, SecOffer deleting this stream file is done it 8 times. Instead of having 8 individual entries, we see 1 transaction here or 1 listing telling us it's 8 times. So we're not trying to drink from a fire hose. Okay, we can easily go through this information. I see we're coming up at the top of the hour. I blabbed on, Robin. I do that.
That's all right. I think there's a lot of functionality to show, and even in this time, we haven't had time to show it all. But I think it's worth pointing out from a reporting perspective, because obviously there's a lot of transactions there that typically you're not going to be looking at the approved transactions, right? So we would normally segment that into rejected transactions. So you're going to be ruling by exception, and I think it's worth mentioning that absolutely we can do that as well. But it's certainly great visibility and choice of interface depending on whether you prefer the green screen or work in the green screen environment all the time anyway, or if you want to use the web interface. This is a scalable, responsive web interface, which means it works on a mobile device, a tablet, and depending on the amount of screen real estate, it'll manipulate the format of the screen so that it will fit in. So it's a really dynamic interface to use, and this is all available right now. So absolutely, thank you, Paulie. I appreciate that.
Pleasure.
I'm going to go ahead and, I'm going to grab presentation rights back here.
Thank you, Robin. Bueno, con esto damos por terminado nuestro webinar. No sin antes recordarles una prueba sin costo, ¿verdad? Del software Exit Point Manager, Network Security, igualmente el Scan Security. Bueno, quiero agradecer su tiempo y cualquier duda, inquietud sobre nuestras tecnologías de servicio, pues no duden en llamarnos al número que se encuentra en pantalla o escribirnos a nuestro correo electrónico. Que tengan un excelente día. Gracias.